Most people know exactly how they earn their money through paychecks, investments, or business ventures they actively manage. But these people woke up one day to discover they were suddenly rich with absolutely no memory or understanding of how it happened. 1. A teacher woke up to find $2.3 million in her checking account with no explanation whatsoever. She'd gone to bed with $847 in her account and woke up a millionaire. Her bank had no record of where the money came from or who sent it. The deposit showed no sender information, transfer details, or any documentation. She reported it immediately, thinking it was obviously a bank error. Investigators found no error in the bank's systems or records. The money had simply appeared in her account through normal deposit channels. No one came forward claiming they'd sent money to the wrong account. Government agencies investigated for money laundering but found nothing suspicious. The IRS investigated the mysterious deposit for tax fraud or evasion. After 2 years of investigation, authorities couldn't find the source. Her account showed the money was legally deposited through proper banking channels. Financial experts had never seen money appear so mysteriously with zero trace. She was advised to keep the money after all investigations concluded. The mysterious deposit remained unexplained despite extensive forensic accounting. Her life changed from struggling teacher to millionaire overnight inexplicably. The source of the $2.3 million remains unknown to this day. She eventually used the money to buy a house and invest conservatively. The banking mystery became a case study in unexplained financial phenomena. 2. A man discovered he owned a successful company worth $8 million that he'd never heard of before. Legal documents showed he was listed as the sole owner and CEO. The company had been operating profitably for 15 years under his name. Employees confirmed he was the owner, but they'd never met him personally. His signature appeared on all founding documents, though he had no memory of signing them. The business address was in a state he'd never visited in his life. Tax returns showed he'd been paying taxes on this income for years unknowingly. His accountant had been filing returns for the mystery company automatically. The company's board of directors claimed they'd been reporting to him via email for years. Those emails existed in an account he didn't know he had. The company manufactured specialized industrial equipment he knew nothing about. Legal investigations couldn't determine how he became owner of this thriving business. His identity had been used legitimately to found the company somehow. No fraud was detected despite the impossibility of the situation. The mystery company made him wealthy beyond his wildest imagination. He eventually hired management to run the company he'd apparently owned for years. The origin of his business ownership remains completely unexplained. 3. A woman woke up owning 47 properties across the country worth $12 million total. Property records showed her name on all the deeds dating back decades. She'd apparently been collecting rental income that was automatically deposited. Her bank statements showed rental payments she'd never questioned or noticed. The properties were all well maintained by management companies she'd never hired. Tenants confirmed paying rent to her name for years. She had no memory of purchasing any real estate ever. The deed transfers showed her signature from years ago. Handwriting experts confirmed the signatures were genuinely hers somehow. Notaries had documented her signing these property transfers she didn't remember. The properties were spread across 12 different states. Her tax returns showed real estate income she'd been paying taxes on unknowingly. Property managers claimed they'd been sending her reports for years. Those reports existed in storage units rented in her name. Legal experts couldn't explain how she'd acquired this real estate empire. The property values had appreciated, making her a multi-millionaire. She discovered she'd been a landlord her entire adult life without knowing it. The mystery real estate portfolio changed her life completely. 4. A man found out he'd been receiving royalty payments for a patent he didn't invent. The patent was for a medical device earning millions in licensing fees annually. His name appeared as the inventor on all official patent documents. The invention date predated when he would have had the knowledge to create it. Engineering experts confirmed he couldn't have invented this device. Patent office records showed he'd filed all the paperwork personally. The medical device was being used in hospitals worldwide. Companies had been paying him licensing fees for over a decade. His bank account showed these payments, but he'd never noticed them. The payments were labeled as royalty income in his statements. Lawyers investigated whether his identity had been stolen for patent fraud. No evidence of identity theft or fraud could be found anywhere. The patent was legitimately filed under his real information. Other inventors claimed they'd collaborated with him, though he'd never met them. The medical device had saved thousands of lives worldwide. His invention made him wealthy beyond anything he'd earned in his actual job. The patent mystery remained unsolved, despite extensive investigation. He continued receiving royalty payments for an invention he didn't create. 5. A teacher discovered she'd been the beneficiary of a trust fund worth $5 million since birth mysteriously. The trust had been managed by lawyers she'd never met in her life personally. Her parents had died when she was young and never mentioned any trust before. The trust documents showed it was established before she was born specifically. The mysterious benefactor who funded it was listed as anonymous donor only. Trust managers had been investing the money successfully for 40 years professionally. She'd been entitled to distributions since age 18, but never knew about it. The accumulated wealth had grown to millions over the decades through investment. Legal documents showed the trust was specifically created for her by name. Genealogy research couldn't identify who would have funded this trust for her. Her adoptive family had no knowledge of any wealthy relatives anywhere. The trust's origin attorney had died years ago, taking secrets with him. Bank records showed the initial funding came from an untraceable account internationally. She discovered she'd been a millionaire her entire adult life unknowingly. The trust revelation explained nothing about who cared enough to do this. Her financial struggles had been unnecessary for decades while money waited. The anonymous benefactor's identity remains a complete mystery today. Trust investigators spent years trying to identify the benefactor without success. Legal documents provided no clues about the donor's identity or motivation. Financial forensics couldn't trace the original funding source despite advanced techniques. 6. A man woke up to find he was the heir to a European estate worth $15 million in total value. Genealogy records showed he was the last living descendant of a noble family. He'd grown up middle class with no knowledge of any aristocratic heritage whatsoever. DNA testing confirmed his lineage to this ancient family line conclusively. The estate included a castle, land, and substantial investment portfolios accumulated. European lawyers had been searching for him for 5 years unsuccessfully. His family tree connected him to nobility he'd never heard of before. Historical records documented his ancestors, but he'd known nothing about them. The inheritance included titles and land holdings dating back centuries. Tax authorities in multiple countries confirmed his legal claim to the estate. He'd been entitled to this inheritance since birth, but no one knew he existed. The noble family had died out except for his obscure American branch. His parents had apparently never known about their aristocratic connections either. Genealogists confirmed the inheritance was legitimate and properly his. The castle had been maintained by trustees awaiting an heir for years. His life changed from ordinary American to European nobility overnight dramatically. The ancestry revelation made him question his entire family history completely. European estate lawyers traveled to America to meet him finally. The castle required substantial maintenance costs he now had to budget for. His noble title came with ceremonial responsibilities he needed to learn about. The estate included valuable art and historical artifacts worth millions separately. 7. A woman discovered cryptocurrency wallets in her name containing $9 million worth of Bitcoin currently. The wallets had been created years ago when Bitcoin was nearly worthless. She'd never bought cryptocurrency or understood blockchain technology at all. The wallet passwords were somehow stored in her email account mysteriously. Blockchain records showed the Bitcoin had been purchased in her name in 2011. Cybersecurity experts couldn't explain how she'd acquired this cryptocurrency originally. The purchase history showed transactions she'd never authorized or made personally. Her bank statements from that time showed no corresponding purchases anywhere. The Bitcoin had appreciated from a few $100s to millions dramatically. Cryptocurrency exchanges confirmed the accounts were legitimately registered to her. No hacking or identity theft could be detected in the transactions anywhere. The private keys were only accessible to her somehow exclusively. She'd been a Bitcoin millionaire for years without knowing it existed. Blockchain analysts were baffled by the mysterious wallet creation and funding. The cryptocurrency windfall made her independently wealthy instantly overnight. The source of her Bitcoin fortune remains completely unexplained today. She cashed out the cryptocurrency, still not understanding how she got it. Blockchain forensics couldn't trace the original Bitcoin purchases to any source. Cryptocurrency experts studied her case as an unsolved blockchain mystery. The timing of the purchases suggested insider knowledge she didn't possess. 8. A teacher woke up to discover his artwork was selling for hundreds of thousands internationally in galleries. Paintings attributed to him were in galleries and museums worldwide displayed prominently. He'd never painted professionally or shown his work anywhere publicly. Art experts authenticated the paintings as genuinely his work conclusively. His signature appeared on paintings he had no memory of creating ever. The art style matched his casual hobby paintings exactly somehow. Collectors had been buying his work for years thinking he was reclusive. Gallery owners claimed they'd been representing him for over a decade successfully. His agent was someone he'd never met or authorized to represent him. Art auction records showed his pieces selling for 6 figures each regularly. The paintings dated back years, but he didn't remember creating them. Art critics had written extensively about his brilliant technique and vision specifically. His name was established in the art world despite his ignorance. Museums owned his work and featured it in permanent collections. The art sales had generated millions in income deposited into accounts he didn't know existed. His accidental art career made him wealthy beyond belief. The mystery of his art success remains unsolved to this day. Art historians couldn't explain how he'd created such a prolific body of work. Gallery records showed exhibitions he'd supposedly attended for openings. Art collectors claimed they'd met him personally at gallery events. His paintings showed a progression of style suggesting years of dedicated practice. 9. A man found out he'd been collecting pension payments from a job he'd never worked at all. The pension showed he'd worked 30 years at a company he'd never heard of. Employment records listed him as a dedicated employee who'd retired years ago. His Social Security showed the work history and contributions clearly. The company confirmed he'd been an employee with perfect attendance records. Co-workers from this mystery job claimed to remember working with him. His employee file contained photos of someone who looked exactly like him. Personnel records showed promotions and raises throughout his supposed career. The pension had been automatically deposited for years without his knowledge. His tax returns showed the pension income he'd been paying taxes on. No identity theft or fraud could be detected in any records anywhere. The company's HR department insisted he'd definitely worked there for decades. Union records showed him as a dues-paying member for decades. His mystery career had earned him a substantial pension for life. Investigators couldn't explain how he'd simultaneously worked 2 lives. The pension payments continued despite no one understanding how this happened. His double life remained a complete mystery to everyone, including him. Company records showed him attending meetings and completing projects. His employment file included performance reviews praising his work. Retirement party photos existed, showing him receiving a gold watch. Former supervisors claimed they remembered him as a reliable employee. 10. A woman discovered she owned valuable mineral rights worth $7 million she'd never purchased anywhere. Legal records showed she'd owned oil and gas rights for 20 years. The land the rights covered was in states she'd never visited personally. Energy companies had been paying her royalties for years automatically. Her bank account showed these payments labeled as mineral royalties clearly. The rights were generating substantial income from active drilling operations. Title searches showed her name on mineral rights deeds dating back decades. She'd apparently inherited these rights, but no one knew from whom. Family genealogy showed no relatives who owned land or mineral rights. The rights covered thousands of acres of productive oil fields. Energy lawyers confirmed her ownership was legal and undisputed. Companies drilling on the land had been honoring her ownership for years. Her mystery mineral rights made her a millionaire from fossil fuel extraction. Tax records showed she'd been reporting this income unknowingly automatically. The source of her mineral rights ownership remained completely unexplained. She continued collecting royalties from energy she didn't know she owned. The mineral rights mystery transformed her financial situation forever dramatically. Energy companies had been trying to contact her about lease renewals. Geological surveys showed her rights were in highly productive areas. The drilling operations were expanding, increasing her royalty payments. Her rights included both oil and natural gas extraction. 11. A teacher woke up with a Swiss bank account containing $4 million she'd never opened or knew about. The account had been established in her name 30 years earlier. Swiss banking records showed regular deposits and interest accumulation over decades. She'd never been to Switzerland or dealt with foreign banks ever. The account was completely legal and properly registered to her. Swiss authorities confirmed no fraud or money laundering was involved. The deposits came from sources that no longer existed or were traceable. Her signature appeared on banking documents she didn't remember signing ever. International banking investigators couldn't find the origin of the funds. The account had grown from smaller deposits to millions over decades. Swiss privacy laws protected the account's history from full disclosure. She discovered she'd been a Swiss account holder her entire adult life. The account manager claimed they'd been serving her for 30 years. Correspondence existed in files she'd never seen or received. The Swiss account mystery made her unexpectedly wealthy overnight. She gained access to millions she'd never known existed. The account's origin remains one of banking's unsolved mysteries. International financial investigators spent months examining the account. Swiss banking regulations complicated the investigation significantly. The account had been managed conservatively, growing wealth steadily. Currency exchange records showed deposits in multiple foreign currencies. 12. A man discovered he'd written a best-selling book he had no memory of writing at all. The book had sold millions of copies and earned substantial royalties over years. His name was on the cover as the author unquestionably clearly. Publishing records showed he'd signed a legitimate book deal years ago. The manuscript was in his writing style with his personal details included. Publishers had been sending him royalty checks for years regularly. Movie rights had been sold, making him even wealthier significantly. Interviews he'd supposedly given appeared in major publications. Photos of him at book signings existed that he didn't remember attending. Readers contacted him about the book he'd apparently written. The book's content included knowledge he possessed but hadn't written down. Literary agents claimed they'd represented him throughout the publication process. His tax returns showed book income he'd been paying taxes on automatically. Critics had reviewed his brilliant debut novel extensively favorably. The book remained a bestseller years after its mysterious publication. His writing success made him wealthy without him writing anything consciously. The manuscript mystery remained unsolved despite his fame as an author. Publishing house records showed extensive editorial correspondence with him. The book had been translated into 30 languages worldwide. Book tour schedules existed showing him at dozens of events. Literary critics wrote scholarly articles analyzing his writing technique. 13. A woman found she owned a successful restaurant chain worth $11 million. She'd never opened at all. The restaurants operated in multiple cities under her ownership successfully. Business licenses showed her as the registered owner for years. The restaurants were profitable and well-reviewed by customers consistently. Employees believed she was a hands-off owner who trusted management completely. Corporate tax returns showed her as CEO of the restaurant corporation. Health inspections were passed using her name as the responsible party. Franchise agreements existed expanding the chain under her authorization. Her signature appeared on leases and vendor contracts clearly. Banking records showed restaurant profits deposited to accounts in her name. Food critics had written about her culinary vision and business acumen specifically. Industry awards had been presented to her for restaurant excellence. She'd apparently been in the restaurant business for a decade unknowingly. Franchise owners claimed they'd met with her, though she had no memory. The restaurant empire made her wealthy through food service she never provided. The business mystery changed her identity from unknown to restaurant mogul. Her restaurant success remains unexplained to this day completely. Restaurant supply companies had her as a preferred customer. Menu development documents bore her signature on numerous items. The chain had plans for national expansion under her leadership. Restaurant industry publications had profiled her success story extensively. 14. A teacher discovered stocks in his name worth $6 million that he'd never purchased anywhere. The stock certificates dated back 20 years to companies he'd never heard of. Brokerage records showed he'd been an active investor for decades. The stocks had split and grown substantially over time profitably. Dividends had been automatically reinvested, growing his portfolio dramatically. His investment history showed sophisticated trading strategies consistently. Brokerage statements were mailed to addresses he'd lived at years ago. The investment account showed his social security number and personal details. Stock analysts praised his brilliant investment timing and strategy publicly. Tax returns showed capital gains he'd been reporting unknowingly. Financial advisors claimed they'd been managing his portfolio for years. The stocks included early investments in now giant tech companies. His mystery portfolio had outperformed the market consistently year after year. Brokerage compliance found no fraud or unauthorized trading anywhere. The stock ownership made him wealthy through investments he didn't make. His investing success remained a complete mystery to financial experts. He cashed out the stocks, still not understanding how he'd acquired them. Investment records showed him attending shareholder meetings he didn't remember. His portfolio had been rebalanced quarterly following sophisticated strategies. The timing of his stock purchases suggested professional investment knowledge. Brokerage awards recognized him as a top-performing client. 15. A man woke up to find he'd been a silent partner in a tech startup, now worth $20 million. Partnership documents showed he'd been a founding investor years ago at the beginning. The startup had grown into a successful company with major clients. His partnership share was worth millions based on the company valuation. Other partners confirmed he'd been involved since the beginning as a founder. Business plans included his input and strategic direction, apparently throughout. Board meeting minutes showed his participation in major decisions. His email account contained years of business correspondence. Investment records showed he'd contributed capital to fund the startup. The company's success was partially attributed to his vision and leadership specifically. His partnership agreement entitled him to substantial profit distributions. Technology he supposedly helped develop was patented in his name. The startup's IPO was planned, making his shares even more valuable. No fraud or identity theft could be found in any documents. His mystery partnership made him a tech millionaire overnight. The startup's success enriched him through involvement he didn't remember. His founding role remains unexplained, despite the company's success story. Other founders described detailed conversations with him about strategy. His name appeared in company origin stories told to employees. The startup credited him with crucial early strategic decisions. Press releases about the company's founding mentioned his contributions. 16. A woman discovered she'd inherited a jewelry collection worth $8 million from a stranger she'd never met. The collection included rare diamonds, historical pieces, and estate jewelry. Legal documents showed she was the designated heir in a will clearly. The deceased benefactor was someone she'd never met or heard of before. The will specifically named her with her correct identifying information. Jewelry appraisers confirmed the collection's authenticity and value professionally. The pieces had been stored in a vault awaiting her claim. Estate lawyers had been searching for her to execute the will. Genealogy couldn't establish any relationship between her and the deceased. The will provided no explanation for why she'd been chosen as heir. The deceased had been a wealthy collector with no living relatives. Her name appeared in the will years before she would have met anyone connected. Legal experts confirmed the inheritance was completely legitimate. The jewelry collection made her instantly wealthy with historical pieces. No explanation existed for why a stranger left her millions. The inheritance mystery gave her fortune and questions in equal measure. She kept the jewelry still wondering who the benefactor was. Some pieces dated back centuries with documented royal provenance. The collection included pieces from famous jewelry houses. Insurance appraisals revealed several pieces were museum quality. Authentication certificates accompanied each major piece in the collection. 17. A teacher found out he'd been licensing technology patents, earning $500,000 annually from companies. The patents were for innovations he'd never developed or understood technically. Patent records showed him as the inventor with detailed technical specifications. Companies worldwide were using his inventions and paying licensing fees. His name appeared on international patent applications for complex technology. Technical experts confirmed the patents were for real innovations. Licensing agreements existed with major corporations for his technology. Royalty payments had been deposited automatically for years without his notice. Patent attorneys claimed they'd been representing him since the patents were filed. The technology was being used in consumer electronics globally. Industry publications credited him with important technological advances. His patents had generated millions in licensing revenue over time. No fraud or patent theft could be detected in any records. Trade shows had featured his inventions to industry acclaim. The patent income made him wealthy through innovations he didn't create. His technology success remained mysterious to engineering experts. He collected licensing fees for patents he didn't understand or invent. Patent diagrams showed technical details beyond his educational background. The inventions solved complex engineering problems he couldn't explain. Companies sent him technical updates about improvements to his inventions. Industry conferences invited him to speak about his innovations. 18. A man discovered his music was streaming millions of times, earning substantial royalties monthly. Songs attributed to him were on major streaming platforms worldwide. The music was in a genre he'd never performed or recorded. Streaming services confirmed he owned the rights to these popular tracks. Music charts showed his songs performing well commercially consistently. Royalty statements showed income from millions of streams monthly. Record labels claimed they'd released his music years ago. Album artwork featured him, though he didn't remember photo shoots. Music critics had reviewed his albums favorably in publications. Fans existed who considered him their favorite artist passionately. Concert footage appeared online of performances he didn't remember. His music was licensed for commercials and films frequently. The songs were registered with performing rights organizations in his name. Streaming platforms verified he was the rightful copyright holder. His music success made him wealthy through songs he'd never recorded. Industry professionals couldn't explain the mysterious music catalog. He earned streaming income from music that mystified him completely. Music producers claimed they'd worked with him in studios. His music videos had millions of views on various platforms. Fan mail arrived regularly from listeners around the world. Music award nominations listed him in various categories. 19. A woman woke up owning a successful vineyard worth $9 million she'd never planted. Property records showed she'd owned the vineyard for 15 years. The vineyard produced award-winning wines sold internationally. Wine competitions had given her wines prestigious awards. She knew nothing about viticulture or wine production. Employees confirmed she was the owner who managed remotely. Business licenses showed her as the registered proprietor. Wine industry publications had profiled her passion and expertise. Her signature appeared on distribution contracts with major retailers. The vineyard's success had made her wines highly sought after. Tax returns showed wine business income she'd been reporting. Customers praised her wines, though she'd never tasted them. Sommeliers recommended her vineyard's production regularly. The property included valuable California wine country real estate. Her vineyard ownership made her wealthy through wines she'd never made. Wine industry experts couldn't explain her mysterious vineyard empire. She visited her own vineyard as a stranger, discovering her success. 20. A teacher discovered he'd been collecting speaking fees from conferences he'd never attended. Event records showed him as a featured speaker at major conferences. His name appeared on conference programs as a keynote presenter. Speaking fees totaling hundreds of thousands had been paid to him. Conference organizers insisted he delivered excellent presentations. Attendees confirmed they'd seen him speak at these events. Video footage existed of someone presenting under his name. The presentations covered topics he was knowledgeable about somehow. His speaking reputation had grown, making him highly sought after. Future speaking engagements were booked at premium rates. Professional speaker bureaus listed him in their roster. Testimonials praised his engaging and informative presentations. Conference fees had been deposited into accounts he didn't monitor. Industry thought leadership was attributed to his conference speeches. His speaking career made him wealthy through talks he'd never given. Event planners couldn't explain how he'd spoken at conferences during times he was elsewhere. He gained fame as a speaker for presentations that mystified him. 21. A man found he owned a successful online business generating $400,000 annually. The e-commerce site sold products he'd never sourced or shipped. Website registration showed his name and personal information. The business had been operating profitably for 8 years. Customer reviews praised the products and service consistently. Suppliers confirmed long-standing business relationships with him. Payment processors showed thousands of transactions monthly. Business licenses were properly registered in his name. The website had professional design and substantial traffic. Social media accounts promoted the business under his management. Inventory was stored in warehouses rented in his name. Employees handled operations believing he was the remote owner. Tax returns showed e-commerce income he'd been reporting unknowingly. The business had excellent ratings and repeat customers. His online business success made him wealthy through sales he'd never made. Digital forensics couldn't explain the business creation or operation. He discovered he'd been an e-commerce entrepreneur without knowing it. 22. A woman discovered she owned valuable art worth $7 million in storage. Storage units rented in her name contained valuable paintings and sculptures. The art had been stored for decades with rental fees paid automatically. Her signature appeared on the storage contracts from years ago. Art experts authenticated the pieces as genuine, valuable works. The collection included pieces by famous artists and important movements. Insurance policies existed protecting the art in her name. Gallery records showed she'd purchased these pieces years ago. Purchase receipts showed transactions she had no memory of making. The storage facility had her listed as a long-term, reliable client. Art dealers claimed they'd sold her these pieces personally. The art collection's value had appreciated substantially over time. Appraisers confirmed the pieces were important cultural artifacts. Her storage units made her wealthy through art she'd never collected. Art historians couldn't explain her mysterious collections assembly. She gained ownership of museum-quality art inexplicably. 23. A teacher found out movie rights to his life story had been sold for $3 million. Hollywood studios had paid for the rights to his supposedly remarkable life. Film contracts showed his signature authorizing the biographical movie. The life story being filmed didn't match his actual experiences at all. Screenwriters claimed they'd interviewed him extensively for the script. Production companies had been developing the project for years. His life rights deal included consultation fees and royalties. Movie industry publications announced the biographical film project. Actors had been cast to portray him and his fictional exploits. The movie budget was substantial with major studio backing. Film producers insisted he'd been involved throughout development. His life story was dramatically different from his actual life. Rights payments had been deposited to accounts he didn't monitor. Entertainment lawyers confirmed the contracts were legitimate and binding. His life rights sale made him wealthy for a story that wasn't his. Hollywood executives couldn't explain the fictional biography they'd purchased. He profited from a movie about a life he'd never lived. 24. A man discovered rare coins in his name worth $5 million at a bank vault. Safety deposit boxes registered to him contained valuable numismatic collections. The coins dated from ancient civilizations to rare modern issues. Coin dealers authenticated the collection as extremely valuable. His name had been on the vault boxes for 25 years. Bank records showed he'd accessed the boxes regularly, though he didn't remember. The coin collection represented decades of sophisticated collecting. Numismatic societies had him listed as a serious collector and expert. Auction records showed he'd purchased rare coins at premium prices. The collection included coins that had appreciated enormously in value. Insurance covered the coins with him as the policyholder. Coin catalogs referenced his collection as important to the field. Tax records indicated he'd been declaring the collection's value. His vault access history showed regular visits he didn't recall making. The coin collection made him wealthy through numismatics he'd never studied. Collectors couldn't explain his sophisticated accumulation of rare coins. He discovered he'd been a coin expert without any knowledge of it. 25. A woman woke up with a successful consulting business, earning $600,000 annually. Business cards, website, and client testimonials existed for her consultancy. Major corporations listed her as a valuable business consultant. Her consulting fees were substantially higher than her teaching salary. Client contracts showed years of successful consulting relationships. Professional credentials she'd supposedly earned were verified and legitimate. Industry conferences had her as a featured consultant and speaker. Her consulting website showcased case studies and client success stories. LinkedIn showed her as a prominent consultant in her field. Consulting firms had tried recruiting her for senior positions. Business magazines had profiled her innovative consulting approach. Clients confirmed they'd worked with her and valued her expertise. Consulting income had been deposited and taxed properly for years. Her reputation in consulting was established and respected. The consulting business made her wealthy through advice she'd never given. Business consultants couldn't explain her successful practice's existence. She'd apparently been a respected consultant while teaching full-time. 26. A teacher discovered he'd been investing in startups that became unicorns worth billions. His name appeared as an early angel investor in multiple successful companies. Investment documents showed he'd funded companies before they became valuable. The startups included some of the decade's most successful tech companies. His early investments were worth millions after the companies grew. Venture capital firms confirmed his reputation as a savvy early investor. Board positions existed with his name in successful company governance. Investment contracts showed his funding at critical early stages. Other investors remembered collaborating with him on funding decisions. His investment portfolio was the envy of professional venture capitalists. Technology publications credited him with foresight and investment wisdom. The companies he'd funded had changed entire industries. His returns on investment exceeded thousands of %. Startup founders specifically thanked him for his crucial early belief. Angel investing made him wealthy through bets he'd never consciously made. Investment professionals couldn't explain his perfect startup selection record. He discovered he'd been a venture capital success without knowing it. 27. A man found he owned commercial real estate worth $13 million across major cities. Property deeds showed his ownership of office buildings and retail spaces. The commercial properties generated substantial rental income monthly. Property management companies had been handling his real estate portfolio. His ownership dated back years to when the properties were cheaper. The real estate had appreciated enormously in value over time. Tenants included major corporations and successful businesses. Lease agreements bore his signature as the property owner. Property taxes had been paid from accounts he didn't monitor. Real estate investment groups considered him a major player in commercial property. His properties were located in prime commercial districts. Building maintenance and improvements were handled by management firms he'd supposedly hired. Insurance policies protected his substantial real estate holdings. Industry publications mentioned his commercial real estate empire. His property ownership made him wealthy through real estate he'd never purchased. Commercial real estate experts couldn't trace his property acquisition history. He discovered he'd been a real estate mogul without entering a building he owned. 28. A woman discovered film royalties from movies she'd never acted in, earning $4 million. Her name appeared in film credits for movies she'd never seen or been in. Royalty payments came from box office earnings and streaming rights. Film industry databases listed her with a substantial filmography. Her performances were supposedly memorable in these films. Acting unions had her listed as a member in good standing. Residual payments arrived regularly from films and television shows. Her IMDb page showed an impressive acting career. Film festivals had supposedly honored her performances. Directors claimed they'd enjoyed working with her on film sets. Movie reviews mentioned her powerful performances specifically. Her acting agents had been negotiating deals on her behalf for years. Entertainment tax returns showed acting income she'd been reporting. Screen Actors Guild sent her benefits and retirement information. Film royalties made her wealthy from acting she'd never done. Hollywood couldn't explain her extensive credits without her memory. She was apparently an accomplished actress without ever being on a film set. 29. A teacher found out he owned a successful manufacturing company worth $10 million. Factory records showed him as the owner and operator. The company manufactured industrial components for major industries. His ownership dated back to the company's founding years ago. Employees confirmed he was the boss they rarely saw in person. Manufacturing contracts existed with his signature authorization. Business loans had been taken out and repaid in his name. The company had excellent credit and business relationships. Industry trade shows featured his company's products prominently. Manufacturing trade publications had profiled his successful business model. Quality certifications existed with him as the responsible party. The company's profitability had grown steadily under his management. His manufacturing business employed hundreds of people. Supply chain partners confirmed long-standing relationships with his company. The factory made him wealthy through manufacturing he knew nothing about. Industrial experts couldn't explain his successful manufacturing operations. He discovered he'd been a manufacturer while teaching full-time somehow. 30. A man woke up with a successful YouTube channel earning $300,000 annually from ads. The channel had millions of subscribers watching his content regularly. Videos attributed to him had billions of views cumulatively. YouTube analytics showed consistent growth and engagement for years. His face appeared in videos he didn't remember filming. The content covered topics he was knowledgeable about somehow. Subscriber comments praised his videos and personality. Brand partnerships existed, earning substantial sponsorship income. Merchandise was sold featuring his name and likeness. Other YouTubers collaborated with him in videos he didn't remember. Social media accounts promoted the channel under his management. Video production quality was professional with expensive equipment. Ad revenue and sponsorships had been deposited monthly for years. His YouTube success made him a recognized online personality. Platform analytics confirmed the channel was legitimately his. Digital media experts couldn't explain the channel's creation or content. He discovered he'd been a content creator without filming anything consciously. 31. A woman discovered she'd been licensing her image and name for $250,000 yearly. Her likeness appeared in advertisements and promotional materials globally. Endorsement deals existed with her signature and authorization. Major brands used her image to promote their products. Modeling releases showed she'd agreed to these licensing deals. Her face was recognizable from advertising campaigns. Licensing fees had been paid consistently for years. Agents claimed they'd been managing her licensing career successfully. Her image appeared on products sold in stores worldwide. Advertising agencies confirmed working with her on campaigns. Portfolio photos existed of professional modeling sessions she didn't remember. Fashion magazines had featured her in editorial spreads. Her licensed image made her wealthy from modeling she'd never done. Advertising professionals couldn't explain her licensing success. She was apparently a recognized model without ever posing for photos. 32. A teacher found he owned a successful app generating $500,000 annually from downloads. The mobile application had millions of users worldwide. App Store records showed him as the developer and owner. The app provided useful functionality with excellent reviews. Software development under his name was sophisticated and professional. User ratings were consistently high with loyal customers. Update history showed regular improvements and new features. His developer account was verified and in good standing. In-app purchases and subscriptions generated substantial revenue. Technology publications had reviewed his app favorably. Tech conferences had featured his app as innovative. Customer support was handled by a team he'd supposedly hired. The app's code was copyrighted in his name. Apple and Google had paid him developer earnings for years. App success made him wealthy through software he'd never coded. Technology experts couldn't explain the app development without his knowledge. He discovered he'd been a successful app developer without programming skills. 33. A man discovered rare book collections in his name worth $6 million. Library records showed him as the owner of valuable rare books. The collections included first editions and historically significant texts. Book dealers authenticated the collection as extraordinarily valuable. His name appeared in Rare Book Society memberships. Storage facilities housed the books under his registration. Insurance policies protected the collections with substantial coverage. Auction records showed he'd purchased rare books at premium prices. Bibliographic databases listed his collection as important. Rare book experts knew him as a serious collector. The book's value had appreciated enormously over decades. Libraries had requested loans of books from his collection. His collecting focused on specific valuable categories. Tax records showed he'd been declaring the collection's value properly. The book collection made him wealthy through texts he'd never collected. Literary experts couldn't explain his sophisticated rare book acquisitions. He discovered he'd been a bibliophile without reading the books. 34. A woman woke up owning a successful podcast network, earning $400,000 yearly. Multiple podcasts were produced under her network's banner. The podcasts had millions of downloads and loyal audiences. Podcast hosting services showed her as the account owner. Advertising deals existed with major brands sponsoring the shows. Her network was respected in the podcasting industry. Podcast hosts claimed they worked for her production company. Recording equipment was owned by her company. Distribution contracts existed for podcast syndication. Industry awards recognized her network's podcast excellence. Listeners considered her network's podcasts top-tier content. Sponsorship revenue had been deposited regularly for years. Her network employed producers, editors, and marketing staff. Podcast directories featured her network prominently. The podcast network made her wealthy through audio she'd never produced. Media professionals couldn't explain her podcast empire's creation. She discovered she'd been a podcast mogul without recording a single episode. 35. A teacher found precious metals in his name worth $8 million in vaults. Gold, silver, and platinum bars were stored with his ownership. Precious metals dealers confirmed his holdings were substantial. The metals had been purchased years ago at lower prices. Storage fees had been paid automatically for decades. His investment in precious metals was sophisticated and timed well. Some commodity trading records showed his metal purchases. The metal's value had appreciated significantly over time. His holdings represented serious investment in physical commodities. Precious metals certificates were registered in his name. Tax records showed he'd been declaring these holdings. Dealer relationships existed for buying and selling metals. His metals investment made him wealthy through commodities he'd never touched. Financial advisors couldn't explain his precious metals accumulation. He discovered he'd been invested in gold without knowing it. 36. A man discovered he owned a successful bed and breakfast worth $3 million. The B&B operated in a popular tourist destination with excellent reviews. Property records showed his ownership of the historic building. Guests praised the accommodations and service consistently. His name appeared on tourism websites and travel guides. The B&B had been operating profitably for years under his ownership. Staff confirmed he was the owner who managed remotely. Booking systems showed his property consistently filled. Tourism awards recognized his B&B's excellence. Property taxes and business licenses were in his name. The B&B's reputation attracted guests year-round. Online reviews ranked it highly among area accommodations. His hospitality business generated substantial income annually. Insurance and operating permits were properly maintained. The B&B made him wealthy through hospitality he'd never provided. Tourism professionals couldn't explain his successful operation. He discovered he'd been an innkeeper without greeting a single guest. 37. A woman found she'd been writing a successful blog earning $200,000 yearly from ads. The blog had millions of monthly readers following her content. Blog posts appeared regularly under her name and writing style. Advertising networks paid her substantial revenue from traffic. Her blog was influential in its niche with dedicated followers. Social media promoted the blog under her accounts. Comments showed engaged readers who valued her insights. Blogging conferences had invited her as a featured speaker. Other bloggers considered her a leader in the community. Her blog content covered topics she knew about somehow. Sponsored posts earned additional income from brands. The blog's archives contained years of consistent posting. Search engines ranked her blog highly for relevant topics. Email newsletters went to thousands of subscribers regularly. Blog income made her wealthy through writing she'd never published. Digital publishers couldn't explain her successful blog's operation. She discovered she'd been an influential blogger without writing posts. 38. A teacher discovered he'd been a silent investor in multiple successful restaurants. Partnership documents showed his investment in 5 thriving eateries. The restaurants generated substantial profit distributions to him. Restaurant reviews praised the establishments highly. His investment dated back to when the restaurants opened. Chef owners claimed he'd been a supportive financial partner. Business licenses showed his partial ownership stake. The restaurants had grown from single locations to mini chains. Food critics had celebrated the restaurant's culinary excellence. His investment had multiplied several times over years. Partnership agreements entitled him to percentage ownership. Restaurant operations were successful with loyal customer bases. The dining establishments were local favorites and tourist destinations. His restaurant investments made him wealthy through dining he'd never experienced. Restaurant industry professionals couldn't explain his investment history. He discovered he'd been financing fine dining without eating at his restaurants. 39. A man woke up with a successful photography business earning $350,000 annually. His name was established in wedding and portrait photography. Photography portfolio websites showcased work attributed to him. Clients praised his photographic vision and professionalism. Wedding couples considered him their photographer of choice. His business had been operating successfully for over a decade. Equipment worth hundreds of thousands was registered to his business. Photography studios were leased in his name for shoots. Industry awards recognized his photographic excellence. Photography magazines had featured his work and techniques. Other photographers knew him as a respected professional. Social media showcased his photography to thousands of followers. His business calendar was booked months in advance. Accounting records showed substantial photography income annually. Photography success made him wealthy through pictures he'd never taken. Photography professionals couldn't explain his portfolio or reputation. He discovered he'd been an acclaimed photographer without owning a camera. 40. A woman discovered subscription box business in her name, earning $450,000 yearly. The subscription service had thousands of monthly subscribers. Curated boxes were shipped under her brand consistently. Subscribers praised the quality and curation of the boxes. Her subscription business had excellent retention and growth. Fulfillment centers operated shipping boxes in her name. The business model was successful with predictable revenue. Marketing campaigns promoted the subscription under her brand. Business partnerships existed with vendors supplying box contents. Her subscription business was featured in lifestyle publications. Customer service teams handled subscriber inquiries. The boxes became popular gifts and personal treats. Social media influencers promoted her subscription service. Business licenses and insurance existed properly. Subscription success made her wealthy through curation she'd never done. E-commerce experts couldn't explain the business operation. She discovered she'd been an entrepreneur without curating a single box. 41. A teacher found he owned a successful gym franchise worth $5 million. Franchise agreements showed his ownership of 5 gym locations. The gyms operated successfully with thousands of members. Fitness trainers and staff worked at his gym facilities. His gyms had excellent reputations for equipment and services. Franchise fees and royalties generated substantial income. Gym memberships provided recurring monthly revenue. The fitness industry recognized his gym brand. Health inspections and business licenses were properly maintained. Gym locations were in prime real estate areas. Members praised the facilities and training programs. His franchise system was expanding with new locations planned. Fitness industry publications profiled his successful gym business. Insurance and equipment were professionally managed. Gym ownership made him wealthy through fitness he'd never provided. Fitness industry professionals couldn't explain his franchise empire. He discovered he'd been a gym owner without exercising at his facilities. 42. A man discovered he'd been licensing his cooking recipes for $300,000 annually. Cookbooks featured recipes attributed to his creation. Food companies licensed his recipes for packaged products. His name appeared on cooking shows and recipe websites. Culinary schools taught his recipes to students. Food critics praised his innovative cooking techniques. Recipe licensing agreements existed with major food brands. His recipes appeared in magazines and newspapers regularly. Celebrity chefs claimed they'd collaborated with him. Cooking competitions featured dishes based on his recipes. Television cooking shows had supposedly featured him as a guest. His recipes were bestsellers in cookbook form. Food photography showcased dishes from his recipes. Restaurant menus credited his recipe innovations. Recipe licensing made him wealthy through cooking he'd never done. Culinary professionals couldn't explain his recipe portfolio. He discovered he'd been a celebrity chef without cooking professionally. 43. A woman found she owned successful escape room businesses earning $400,000 yearly. Escape room facilities operated in multiple cities profitably. The escape rooms had excellent reviews and repeat customers. Game design attributed to her was creative and challenging. Her business had been operating for years successfully. Staff managed the escape rooms under her ownership. Booking systems showed consistent customer traffic. Entertainment publications recognized her escape room excellence. Team-building corporate clients used her facilities regularly. Escape room enthusiasts considered her designs among the best. Business licenses and insurance were properly maintained. The facilities were located in entertainment districts. Her escape room business expanded to new markets. Safety inspections were passed consistently. Escape room success made her wealthy through entertainment she'd never designed. Entertainment industry professionals couldn't explain the business operation. She discovered she'd been an escape room mogul without solving a single puzzle. 44. A teacher discovered rare stamp collections in his name worth $7 million. Philatelic societies listed him as a serious stamp collector. The stamp collection included historically significant and rare issues. Stamp dealers authenticated the collection as extraordinarily valuable. His collection was referenced in philatelic literature. Storage facilities housed the stamps under his ownership. Insurance policies protected the valuable collection. Auction records showed he'd purchased rare stamps at auctions. His collecting focused on specific valuable categories. Stamp exhibitions had featured pieces from his collection. The stamp's value had appreciated enormously over decades. Philatelic experts knew his collection's importance. His membership in stamp societies was active and respected. Tax records showed he'd been declaring the collection's value. The stamp collection made him wealthy through philately he'd never practiced. Collectors couldn't explain his sophisticated stamp acquisitions. He discovered he'd been a philatelist without collecting a single stamp. 45. And finally, a man woke up with offshore accounts containing $10 million he'd never opened. International banking showed accounts in tax-advantaged jurisdictions. The offshore accounts were completely legal and properly disclosed. His name appeared on all account documents legitimately. The accounts had been established years ago. Deposits came from sources that were legal but untraceable. International tax compliance showed proper reporting. Financial advisors claimed they'd been managing his offshore wealth. The accounts were in countries with strict banking privacy. Investment returns had grown the accounts substantially. No money laundering or illegal activity was detected. International banking regulations were followed completely. His offshore wealth was substantial and legally his. Financial forensics couldn't trace the account's origins. The offshore accounts made him wealthy through money he'd never deposited. International banking experts couldn't explain the account creation. He discovered he'd been an offshore account holder without traveling internationally, proving that wealth can appear as mysteriously as it can disappear, demonstrating that financial mysteries sometimes have no explanation despite exhaustive investigation, and showing that some people become rich through circumstances that defy all logical explanation and remain unsolved despite everyone's best efforts to understand how. These mysterious wealth stories prove that money can appear without explanation, defying all attempts to understand the source. What makes these cases fascinating is that despite extensive investigation, no one could determine how these fortunes appeared or why. The lesson is that financial mysteries exist that challenge our understanding of how wealth works in modern society. Subscribe if these unexplained fortune stories amazed you, and maybe check your own accounts for money you didn't know existed.